On this day, 1998, The Truman Show opens in theaters.
He's gone.
Okay? Yes!
Want to do it again?
No!
Find out.
Truman, where are you going?
You can tell us.
How do we stop him? Give me some lightning.
Is that the best you can do?
Cut transmission! I like your pen. I was wondering that myself.
Jim Carrey. The Truman Show. Watch what happens.
And a hearty welcome to one and all. This is episode 206. Wow. Of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your happy hump day, hopefully a happy hump day, here with me in New York. Now I'm going to skip all of the business stuff, asking you to subscribe to the channel. Ooh. Because I figure if you want to subscribe, you don't need me to remind you. You will do it if you so choose. Don't need any subliminal imagery. Also, I'm excited to get into today's episode, which is a movie that is, if it's not in my top 10 favorite films of all time, it's close. It's in the top 25 for sure. But on this day, 1998, so 26 years ago today, Peter Weir's incredibly predictive, eerily so, predicting a future where everyone is a star or thinks they're a star or wants to be a star, or the world revolves around them, The Truman Show. Starring Jim Carrey, Laura Linney, Noah Emmerich, Paul Giamatti in a small role, and a phenomenal Ed Harris as Christoph, the creator of The Truman Show. Take the OF away from his name. The name is not an accident. He is a Christ-like figure, for better or worse. But The Truman Show was a film that was on my radar for months, in a similar vein to, for example, Pulp Fiction, which won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival 1994. Jury chairman Clint Eastwood. It's one of the reasons, on top of the obvious, why Quentin Tarantino always had a soft spot for Clint, because Clint championed his film before anyone else, at least any American big shots. But Pulp Fiction won the Palme d'Or in the spring of 1994. We didn't get to see it in the United States until September, October. It was a long time. People were talking about the movie for months. We had no means with which to see it. There were no bootleg copies. Nobody had a renegade VHS tape. Occasionally you would get one of those. Nothing. We just had to sit back and wait. Now, I was a fan of Jim Carrey before he blew up 30 plus years ago in 1994 with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. Now, oddly enough, I never watched In Living Color. There are a lot of Generation Xers right now who are nodding their head, and they will say that was their first exposure to Jim Carrey. He's the white guy on In Living Color, and he's the funniest one on the show. He's incredible. But my fandom of Jim Carrey started with a movie called Once Bitten, which is a film that some elder millennials would have been familiar with, but if you're under 40, you probably would have had to seek the film out on your own if you were a fan of Carrey, just wanted to check it. Well, I wonder what he did before he was famous. So I watched Once Bitten. I must have seen it 15 times. It was yet another movie that they had on heavy rotation on HBO and Cinemax. So I was a fan of his when he had the small role, speaking of Dirty Harry, in the fifth and final Dirty Harry film, The Deadpool. Jim's one of the highlights of the film. He's terrific. He plays a kind of drugged out rocker. That's a movie that Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle, it was from that movie. And Jim's character, his name is Johnny Squares. He lip syncs Welcome to the Jungle. I don't know that I've ever read any quotes from Axl Rose. Did he get a kick out of Jim Carrey's interpretation of what Axl Rose might be like singing that song? I don't know. But he makes an impression in that film. And there are other movies from that time frame where he makes an impression, like Earth Girls Are Easy. But it wasn't until Ace Ventura: Pet Detective in 94 that everyone took notice. This guy is different. And a lot of people, including, as Jim talked about in a recent interview with Sacha Baron Cohen and Ben Stiller, among others, there were a lot of people who were not ready and did not have any idea what this guy was doing. They thought that Jim Carrey was just completely crocked, just a fucking lunatic out there, or as Owen Gleiberman, who later became one of his hugest fans in Hollywood, the Entertainment Weekly reporter, when he watched Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, he said Jim Carrey looks like an escaped mental patient impersonating a game show host. He gave the film an F. But that movie was a huge hit. And then The Mask was an even bigger hit. And Dumb and Dumber was a monster hit. And Ace Ventura 2 was a monster hit. Batman Forever, where he plays the Riddler, huge hit. Cable Guy, not that big of a hit relative to budget and relative to Jim's $20 million paycheck, but there were a number of critics who didn't like the movie that spotlighted, wait a minute, the star is supposed to be Matthew Broderick? I don't even remember anything he does in the film. Jim Carrey is so good, he dominates every scene. And not just with the big personality and chewing the scenery, but he dominates because the force of his personality makes you say, wow. So after Cable Guy, he did Liar Liar, huge hit. And then he turned right around and started filming The Truman Show. Now, the original, Peter Weir's original conception, before The Truman Show, I was a fan of Peter Weir. He did the film with Jeff Bridges, which got a lot of acclaim and a Best Supporting Actress nomination for Rosie Perez. For the wrong movie. She should have been nominated in '92 for White Men Can't Jump. Billy, you're so stupid, Billy. Come on, Billy. She's phenomenal. But she got an Oscar nomination for Supporting Actress for Peter Weir's Fearless, which is a very difficult but excellent film where Jeff Bridges plays a plane crash survivor, as does Rosie Perez. And the movie goes places that no movies really go, and where you're not expecting them to go, or this film, and it's terrific. And I love his film from 10 years earlier, Year of Living Dangerously, in which Linda Hunt won Best Supporting Actor or Actress. She basically was playing a guy, and there's all kinds of gender politics at play, although in the world of the movie, it's a guy. Like, it's Billy Kwan, it's not a transgender. It's just the way that it was done. It's similar 10 years later, The Crying Game. I don't want to give away the secret to The Crying Game, even though it's now 34 years later. But the idea is Peter Weir, Picnic at Hanging Rock. He did Gallipoli, also with Mel, which is a phenomenal movie. This is an extraordinary talent. Might not have the filmography of the Spielberg, Scorsese's, Coppola's, Lucas's, Hitchcock's. But Weir is every bit as talented. I mean, I would say Master and Commander. I'd put Master and Commander up with any movie as far as a big budget Hollywood spectacle done right. Master and Commander, as good as it gets. No pun intended with the Jack Nicholson film. But I was excited for The Truman Show because supposedly Andrew Nicole's screenplay, and this was back in the day when I was like a writer who was trying to sell a spec script, and I had interest on this one and option on that one, and it's all really cool. And then you read about this Andrew Nicole guy who got, I don't know, $2 million or $1.5. There's some crazy amount for a screenplay. He also did Gattaca. Gattaca sold first. I want to say Gattaca sold for more money. That part I'm not sure of. But he ended up being a home run hitter himself. But the way The Truman Show was described, and knowing Jim Carrey was going to star, and knowing, although this didn't pan out, Dennis Hopper was cast in the role that eventually became Ed Harris. Now, for those who don't know, and it's funny, my movie posters here are coming into play a lot. Dennis Hopper plays the big bad in Blue Velvet. And just the thought, because he was a guy who was known for chewing scenery and just eating up the lens and taking control of wherever, whatever space he was in, he's all you see. Dennis Hopper had some of the strongest screen presence this side of Clint Eastwood or Harrison Ford. Hell, or Russell Crowe. So the idea was, they didn't really go into all the details because I don't think they know them. They said Dennis Hopper is going to play the creator of this TV show, and Jim Carrey is on this show and doesn't realize he's on a TV show. And that sounded interesting. And then there were people that were talking about a TV series with Patrick Magoon, another actor I liked. He played the warden in Escape from Alcatraz, another Clint Eastwood film, highly recommended. kind of a Shawshank Redemption angle, only it's based on a true story of the only successful breakout from Alcatraz Island. It's the reason why the prison was closed in '63. And Magoon also played, was it Edward the Longshanks? Whoever the king was that sets the plot of Braveheart in motion. Magoon played that character and crushed it. He was amazing. But the TV show The Prisoner, there were people, before they knew the full story and the full plot of Truman Show, were saying, this sounds like that old TV series with Patrick Magoon. It has, it seems to have elements in common. So I was excited. The general sense was, this is going to be something a little different for Jim. There might be some opportunity for humor, but we don't see how this can be a comedy the way that it's being described. So under normal circumstances, and I was enough of a fan, and I'm aware enough of how Hollywood works in terms of release dates and Oscar qualifying runs and all of these things. The Truman Show was completed and could theoretically have screened for critics in December of 1997. I read an article that said it was January. That means that it could have been completed in December if they were going for an Oscar qualifying run, but they weren't. That was going to be the year of Titanic. That was going to be the year of LA Confidential and Jodie Foster's Contact, The Sweet Hereafter, As Good as It Gets, James L. Brooks, Jack Nicholson, The Apostle with Robert Duvall. And there were a lot of great movies. Sweet Hereafter, Adam McGoyan got a lot of nominations. There were a ton of terrific films that hit in 97. And they weren't going to have a release slot. And The Truman Show isn't the kind of film that you would just have an Oscar qualifying run. You wanted to hit the ground and you wanted to make money. So the studio, from what I can understand, and you can Google this yourself, there was never a thought of, maybe we'll just do an Oscar qualifying run in 1997. No, wasn't going to happen. But the film was completed, wrapped, signed, sealed, and delivered. Director's cut, no more editing. In January of 1997. So what the studio did that was ingenious, they didn't officially screen it for critics. They didn't do any more sneak previews because the film was wrapped. But they showed various big people the film. And everybody who saw it raved. And there was an Esquire magazine article, this you can Google, an Esquire magazine article from long before the film was released that said, this could be the movie of the decade. And the studio used that in ads for the film. So a little bit of, you rub my back, I rub yours, I don't know. But the buzz was building for quite some time. And the sense was, we don't need to wait for the critical reviews. We're getting them already. And if this, was it, I forgot the name of it. Whoever it was that wrote that Esquire article was a film theoretician and historian who I knew. He would not have said that. It's like in poker, they say he's not going to call light in this spot. He ain't talking that way without good reason. So we already knew the film was going to be terrific. Just as we knew Pulp Fiction was not going to screen for critics in the United States and everybody was going to say it sucked. Everybody hit the ceiling. Masterpiece button from Siskel, Ebert, David Denby, every major critic, with very few exceptions. What a fucking movie. So once the release date was set, then it was just a question of getting there and seeing the film. Newsday, which was the newspaper we got, rapturous in praise. Daily News hit the ceiling. New York Post hit the ceiling. New York Times. Every local critic, the worst review I saw, if we're going by the 4-star systems, the New York Times didn't do that. Newsday, the Post, and the News did. They used the old school best out of 4. Now most critics go with 5. Give you a little bit more room to maneuver. But everyone loved it. So I went on Friday, I would have been 24, and I saw the film at the, it's called the Shore 8. It's still there in Huntington Village. It's funny, I later in my life, lived a block and a half away from that theater during the days where I lived in the apartment across from the Book Review and above Sir Argentinian Steakhouse. The movie theater was just around the corner and around another corner. It was, by distance, maybe it was 600 feet away, tops. But at this particular time, I was living at my dad's house in Huntington. And he was at work and I wanted to see the movie. So I went to see the film. I went to see the matinee. And I was gobsmacked. Already, It was one of my favorite films of all time. And it has a moment, for me, which Pulp Fiction did something that had a moment, and James Cameron's Aliens. These are the only three films where something happened in a movie that was so ingenious or so incredible, or I was so thrilled by what I was seeing. In the immortal words of John Travolta, I had chills down my spine. Now, when I saw Chariots of Fire, I had an out-of-body experience. I just completely forgot that I was in a movie theater, so I didn't have any chills down my spine. The moment in Aliens where Ripley is on the power loader and she's fighting the alien, and we realize that the alien can attack from every possible angle and position. There is no safe space around that fucking xenomorph. It's the moment in the film, for the first time, when Ripley seems to have the advantage and the alien has an extra mouth and nearly gets Ripley. That was so brilliant to me that seeing it at age 14 or whatever it was the first time, holy shit. The next time I experienced the chill down my spine was in Pulp Fiction, that instantaneous second of the film where you realize that Vincent Vega and Jules Winfield, aka John Travolta and Sam Jackson, they're schmoozing in the same coffee shop that Tim Roth and Amanda Plummer are about to boost. When I realized what I was looking at, I got an unbelievable chill down my spine. I could not believe how brilliant that was. Best movie of 1994. Sorry, Forrest Gump. And I love The Shawshank Redemption. But neither of those films got that reaction out of me. The third time I got that reaction was at the very end, and I'm not spoiling it for those who haven't seen it, but at the very end of The Truman Show, there is a moment where a particular character in the film is watching TV, and Jim Carrey bows. It's nothing more than a bow, as a theatrical performer might engage at the end of a show. There was something about that moment. I'm getting chills just thinking about it now. So the first time I saw The Truman Show by myself, I was just flabbergasted. The movie was even better than I hoped. That is something which doesn't happen very often. It happened with Terminator 2, which I discussed recently on the channel. Occasionally, no matter how much the hype machine hypes something up, when you experience it, it's even better. Doesn't happen often. Usually we're disappointed. This is something you realize as you get older. Best case scenario, middle of the road. Worst case scenario, you're more likely to find middle of the road and worst case scenario than best case scenario. But I love The Truman Show so much, and my dad didn't have a problem with the fact that I had seen it. He wanted to see it. So we went the next day. We went on Saturday, afternoon matinee. And he loved it. I was very confident. We liked a lot of the same movies. He would have had Chariots of Fire in his top 5 for sure. That was also a favorite he could always watch. It's a film. There are certain movies, we used to joke about it, that if they were on, even if he hadn't planned on watching it, he would start watching it. Anytime before streaming, if he was flipping channels and Chariots of Fire was on TV, he stopped to watch. The only other movie that he would do that with, Ivan Reitman's Dave. That was another film that was probably in his top 5. I think he saw that movie more than any movie except Midnight Run. When Midnight Run was on Netflix, this was unfortunately when Dad's health started to go downhill. He watched it 3 times in 1 week, and he'd already seen it like 20 times. He just got such a kick out of that movie. But he loved The Truman Show, and he told everybody, you got to see it. No, I'm not a Jim Carrey fan. It doesn't matter. This is not that kind of, yes, he has his moments where you know it's him and he's clowning. It's not that movie. There are some people saying that this is a comedy. It's not a comedy. And I'm telling you, it's not a comedy. There are comedic moments, and it is such a bright, the area of Sea Haven, Florida, is so bright and so bouncy, and everybody with their plastic smiles. This is a scary fucking movie. This is dystopian sci-fi with the veneer of a light and frothy comedy drama. Take it from me. The more you think about this film, the more you think about the construction of the Truman Show and the ideas behind what they're doing there, the worse it is. So Dennis Hopper was cast as Christoph, the role which ended up being played really well. And I love Ed Harris anyway. Ed Harris has never given, for me, a bad performance. You think about the huge films that he was in, well, The Right Stuff in the 80s, should have won Best Picture. Sorry, Terms of Endearment. I love Jack, supporting actor. That's great. Shirley MacLaine, Deborah Winger. No, thank you. The Right Stuff was the best movie that came out in 1983. It's not even close. But Ed Harris was knocking out one great performance after another. And you go to the 90s and you see films like he did the film China Moon with Madeline Stowe. Really, really good. He did Just Cause. It was kind of his interpretation. He even joked about it in an interview. It was his interpretation of Hannibal Lecter. He played a condemned serial killer in that. The movie it's entertaining. It's not great. The Abyss with James Cameron. Man, I think he wanted to wring James Cameron's neck because Cameron put him through hell. And Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio put her through hell also. But then you move forward. Apollo 13. Harris is fucking incredible. Same year as Just Cause. I think he shot the movies back to back because his hair was very short for Just Cause and it was also very short for Apollo 13. I didn't think of that until just now, but yeah. He did The Rock. He basically played the big bad, General Francis Hummel. You know, one of those 4-star generals, kind of like Robert Redford years later in The Last Castle, where he has a cause and a hill he's willing to go to prison for. That kind of thing. But Ed Harris took over for Dennis Hopper, and I believe this particular time, when it was cited as creative differences, I think it really was. I think that Peter Weir believed that he would have a greater ability to direct Dennis Hopper than he actually ended up having. He thought that he could push Hopper in a certain direction with the role of Christoph. Hopper walked out either on the first day or the second day. I don't think that he and Weir saw eye to eye on anything. There are times where an actor and a director clash over the type of performance. And it's hard to imagine Dennis Hopper giving a quiet, melancholy, meditative performance as Ed Harris gives in this film. That's not why you hire Dennis Hopper. You don't hire him to do that. You hire him to go batshit crazy, like Blue Velvet, to some other extent, like in the movie Hoosiers, and Waterworld and Speed, where he is just off his rocker in those movies, and it adds to the fun of the story and what we're watching. So that's how Ed Harris ended up in there. And for a last-minute replacement, it's like a role he was born to play. His looks, he's perfect with the little beret that he wears and the whole thing. But you see Paul Giamatti in a very small role, Register, and that's a guy that you knew was going places. Donnie Brasco, the forget about it conversation. He has a small role in Saving Private Ryan as a scared out of his mind soldier. He gets to interact with most of the main cast in an early scene. But I then saw The Truman Show for a third time on the Monday. So I saw it 3 times from Friday to Monday. And if I allowed myself, I would have gone to see it another couple of times in theaters. Now, that is not something that I normally did. I saw Lethal Weapon 2 twice in theaters. Once on my own, and once with my dad. I saw LA Confidential, oddly enough, the year before. I saw that twice. Once with my dad, and then twice with Eric and Matt Stash, and 2 of my Massapequa friends, grew up next to them, next door neighbors. It was very unusual for me to do that. I saw Terminator 2 twice with my grandpa in Florida and dad here. I never saw a movie 3 times in theaters. Truman Show was the only one. And even by the 3rd time, there were moments I was already looking forward to. The scene where Truman is 100% convinced there is fuckery afoot. That would be maybe an alternate title for The Truman Show. There is fuckery afoot. But the scene with the buses where he realizes that there's something wrong and he just puts his hand up almost like he's directing traffic, or that he's now God telling the actors and the people what to do. Don't run me over. Philip Glass's musical score, phenomenal. I love Philip Glass. He did the score for Candyman earlier in the decade. OG Candyman, top 10 best film scores as far as I'm concerned. So good. So the Truman Show ended up getting the rapturous critical praise that I mentioned that there was a tease to But the major critics, by and large, loved it. It ended up getting nominated for 3 Oscars. Jim Carrey didn't get nominated for Best Actor. There were a lot of people who were upset about that. But then the next year, he gives a better performance in another huge all-time great filmmaker, Milos Forman, Man on the Moon, essentially playing 2 characters and knocking it out of the park. And he didn't get nominated for that either, which was a crime. Because from a craftsmanship standpoint, it's very impressive in The Truman Show. But what he does in Man on the Moon is on another level. It's a performance at level 4 or 5 because the real Andy Kaufman never stopped performing and nobody ever knew when he was on the level or when he was full of shit. And Carrey is so good in that movie. He won the Golden Globe for both of those, and the Motion Picture Academy gave him the double middle finger salute both times. The irony of The Truman Show, from a cultural, historical perspective, the film grossed $264 plus million at the box office. It's sitting at 94, 95%, depending on what day you log in, on Rotten Tomatoes, which, if you don't want to do the math, it means that 19 out of every 20 film critics tell you to see the movie. This movie is good. This movie is great. This movie is a masterpiece, whatever. 94, 95% is a phenomenal score, especially for a film that has a couple of hundred reviews collected. Some of the older movies, like the Hitchcock films that have 100%, you only have like 20 reviews. Nobody's going to give Rear Window thumbs down. No one's going to give North by Northwest thumbs down. Nobody's going to give Psycho, oh, it's a piece of trash, fuck this shit. No, it's not going to happen. For a 90s film that has been seen by so many people of so many backgrounds and so many different thought processes, 94, 95% is a phenomenal score. And there are plenty of people, if you go on YouTube and watch movie reactors, who went into the film thinking it was a comedy and left the film completely fucked up. I didn't know this was going to be dystopian sci-fi. Well, they didn't call it dystopian sci-fi back then. But if you want to, okay. It's an artificially created reality. And I read an article once how it actually drew a parallel between another movie I've discussed on the channel, Alex Proyas' 1998, same year, Dark City. Now, Dark City has more in common with The Matrix than The Truman Show, but there are common themes between Dark City and The Matrix. The idea of people creating an artificial reality to see what makes someone tick. I never would have drawn comparisons between those two films, but hey, they're 2 of the best films of 1998. Roger Ebert had Dark City as his #1 film of 98. That's the year of Saving Private Ryan and the eventual Oscar winner, Shakespeare in Love. Truman Show, for me, is the best movie of 1998. And I love Dark City almost as much as Ebert. I'm going to put The Truman Show first. And I'll have Dark City and Saving Private Ryan tied for second, and then Shakespeare in Love. But I was not upset when Shakespeare in Love won the Oscar, because I saw that film and I loved it. I thought all the performances were great, and I loved the period details, the witty dialogue. I thought it was fantastic. Simon Callow is great in a supporting role. Rupert Everett, loved it. But The Truman Show, despite making an incredible amount of money at the box office, despite being a beloved film in a lot of quarters, the Oscar nominations, my perception is that it's still underrated by history. I feel like it's timeless, and there are more people who are going to discover this film now, and they will not believe that it's 1998, because it predicted the future of reality TV. It predicted the future of videos going viral and mass media and everybody knowing what everyone else is doing because they got a camera in their face. In most cases, it's their own phone. I don't know how much of a prophet Peter Weir thought he was going to be, or whether he just wanted to make a great movie, which he did. But this is a prophetic, scarily so, motion picture that has only gotten better with time. And Jim Carrey's performance feels touched by genius, even if he doesn't get to show the range and the incredible, just technical skill that he shows the next year in Man on the Moon. But The Truman Show, released on this day, 1998, easily a top 10 favorite film for me, and easily a top 10 best films of the 90s. I don't give a shit what ranking system or how you're looking at it. Is it better than Forrest Gump? Yeah. Do I put it over Shawshank? Tie. Pulp Fiction? I got to put Pulp Fiction above it, but just by the barest of margins. There are other times you might ask me that question and I'll say, no, I take The Truman Show over all of those. But it is that good, and if you have never seen it, I guarantee you, even if you don't like Jim Carrey, he's the star and he's great, but there's so much going on that has nothing to do with the star. And try not to bawl your eyes out in the last 5 minutes. That's as close to a spoiler as I'm going to get. Try not to be dazzled and amazed as this film comes to a conclusion. The Truman Show, released June 5th, 1998, 26 years ago today, directed by the marvelous Peter Weir and starring Jim Carrey, Noah Emmerich, Laura Linney, and Ed Harris. This has been episode 206 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Wednesday early evening here with me in New York. And if you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you caught this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 207 real soon. Till then, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Peace.